A reading from the letter of St. Paul to the Galatians. Brothers and sisters, when the fullness of time had come, God sent his Son. From a woman born under the law, to ransom those under the law, so that we might receive adoption as sons. As proof that you are sons, God sent the Spirit of his Son into our hearts, crying out, Abba, Father. So you are no longer a slave, but a son. And if a son, then also an heir through God. The word of the Lord.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. The shepherds went in haste to Bethlehem and found Mary and Joseph and the infant lying in the manger. When they saw this, they made known the message that had been told them about this child, and all who heard it were amazed by what had been told them by the shepherds. And Mary kept all these things, reflecting on them in her heart. Then the shepherds returned, glorifying and praising God for all they had heard and seen, just as it had been told to them. When 8 days were completed for his circumcision, he was named Jesus, the name given him by the angel before he was conceived in the womb. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Well, good morning and Happy New Year. Thank you. Yeah, great to be here with all of you this morning. And I don't know if any of you are big fans of New Year's resolutions. In the past, I really haven't been, because I found that by about January 3rd is when I give up whatever my thing was. I'm really happy with it and confident on the first, and by the second, I'm like, and then the third's like, I don't need to do that. And so I haven't really been a big fan of New Year's resolutions for most of my life, but I have usually taken the opportunity to at least reflect on the past year and think about the possibilities, right, of the new year that is before us, right, and the hugeness of a year and the amount of things that will take place. It's worth thinking about, right, and it's worth considering, and it's probably worth making some kind of resolution. And hopefully not give it up after a couple of days, right? But actually think about it and pick something that kind of makes sense. And as I've been doing that exercise, right, I've been thinking about how the last year has gone and what I hope for in this new year. I can't help but wonder how many of us, as we go through that exercise, how many of us spend our time thinking about it in terms of discipleship? And how good of a disciple was I last year? Was I able to say yes to the Lord as He called me to various things? Was I willing to be generous in my response of faith, hope, and love? Was I willing to follow His invitations and take Him up on these things even when they were scary, or I had some kind of anxiety about them, or they were somewhat unknown? How did I do last year as far as discipleship, and how do I want to do this year? And I think it's worth thinking about. I think it's worth asking the question, and I actually think that that's why the church gives us this feast on this day, right? Today we celebrate the feast of Mary, Mother of God. And so she is, right? That's what we hear about on Christmas, and we're still celebrating Christmas, right? For those of you who don't know, Christmas isn't just one day in the church, it's 8, and today we're celebrating the last day of Christmas, and so we're still celebrating that particular moment, that particular day in which Jesus Christ was born into the world, and He actually is Emmanuel, God with us. The Word made flesh, God made man. That's who He is, and Mary has this distinguished role of being the person to bear Him to birth and to bring Him forth into the world for our salvation. And I think that the church gives us this feast this day because we're called to imitate her. Right now, obviously, we can't give birth to the Lord the way that Mary does on Christmas Day. But make no mistake about it, the Lord still wants to come. Make no mistake about it, the Lord still wants to have His presence known, and He still wants His presence to be brought forth. And the people that He's waiting on now, it's not Mary and her yes, it's you and it's me and it's us. He waits on His disciples. And He's counting on His disciples to imitate Mary in her motherhood and actually bring Him into all of these different situations, whether it's with our family or with our friends or with our coworkers or with our neighbors or whoever. Right? The Lord is waiting on us to bring Him to the world. And so I think it's worth asking the question, how did I do last year? And what do I want to do this year? And as you think about it, right, think about not just the failures. Sometimes we get this kind of mentality where it's just like, okay, I failed here, 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 and here. And that can be somewhat helpful, right? Especially if I'm failing for the same reasons, right? If I got a lot of fear, right? Maybe I can spend the first part of this year asking the Lord for courage, right? Or maybe if I've got a lot of anxiety, maybe I can spend the first part of this year asking the Lord for peace. Or maybe I've got a lot of, I feel powerless or kind of too weak to actually say yes to Him. Maybe I can ask the Lord for strength, right? And so there's some benefit in thinking about all of those things and reflecting on why it is that I sometimes say no. But don't just stay there, right? Think about all the times you actually said yes. And think about how wonderful of an experience that actually ended up being. Whether it was successful or not. I know in my own life, every time I say yes to the Lord, I have not regretted it. I've never thought to myself, I shouldn't have done what Jesus asked me to do. I shouldn't have done that. Whether or not it was successful in my eyes or not is mostly irrelevant. Every time I actually do say yes to the Lord, it always works out best for my own heart and my own life because it allows me to actually experience the grace of God in the moment. And I understand that I'm not actually alone as I try to do all these things. And I've never regretted saying yes to the Lord. And that's what we also learn from Mary, right? Mary, the mother of God and the perfect disciple. Right? That was the disposition of her heart. She was always ready and always willing and always looking for that opportunity to say yes to the Lord. And so we look to Mary, right? We maybe ask Mary for help in some of these things, right? And we ask for maybe a share in her own heart. That as I look forward to this new year and I think about the kind of disciple that I want to be, and I think about how much I want to actually say yes to the Lord, and I want to cooperate with His grace, and I want to receive His blessing, that I can actually ask our Blessed Mother to help me do that, right? To give me that same disposition of heart, ready and willing to say yes. And so again, as we think about this new year, as we think about the year that we've just put to rest, let's think about it in terms of our discipleship. All those times last year where we said yes and we said no. And let's think about all those times that are coming up this year where we really hope that we can say yes instead of no, or say yes and keep saying yes. Right? And let's start that preparation now so that it doesn't catch us off guard. Because again, the Lord is going to ask us. The Lord's going to wait for us. Right? He's going to allow us to participate in bringing Him forth, right? To imitate Mary in her motherhood. He's going to wait for us, His disciples, to bring Him into all of those different places that He so desperately wants to be in. Like there's no part of your life, there's no part of this world that He considers too insignificant for His presence. He wants to be part of all of it. But He's not going to force it on us. He's not going to make us do it. But in His love and in His mercy and in His patience, He's going to wait for us. He's going to wait for us to make that decision. He's going to wait for us to say yes. And so, brothers and sisters, this coming year, we're going to have lots of opportunities. And the Lord is actually going to give us the chance to say yes or no. As He comes to you this year, what are you going to say to Him?